Evening and welcome to our Farming for Nature webinar on virtual fencing. My name is Bridget Barry and this is coordinated by Farming for Nature. Farming for Nature was set up to inspire and encourage farmers that farm or wish to farm more with nature in mind. And one of the ways we do this is we work with exemplary farmers who are carrying out actions on their farms for nature. And these Q&As that we have online are a good way to find out what they're doing on their land and how they're doing it. But tonight we're going to focus specifically on virtual fencing, and we will kickstart this evening's session with Dr. Barry O'Donoghue from NPWS, who will give us an overview of the pilot project they've been running throughout Ireland. And then I'll ask a few questions to two farmers, Eileen Condon and James Gilmartin, about their experiences of virtual farming on their land. But then we will open it up to the floor and allow you to ask questions to the speakers. So if you can write in the chat box, which is along the black banner, your questions, and towards the second half of the evening, I'll then facilitate these questions. So if you miss any of tonight's session, or if you know anyone that would be interested, it will be up on our YouTube channel by tomorrow afternoon. So feel free to watch it or to share it with anyone who may be interested. And any of our previous Q&A sessions are also up there. So on to tonight's session. I will hand over to Barry now, who will do a 20-minute presentation on the pilot project of virtual fencing. Barry coordinates various programs for the NPWS, including most programs that are related to agriculture. So Barry, over to you. Thanks very much. And I look forward to chatting to Eileen and James afterwards as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bridget, and thanks in advance to Eileen and James, who are amazing people, along with the other farmers who I was privileged enough to work with in this study. And I know that everyone will learn a lot from James and Eileen through this webinar. And before I start, I suppose as well, just to acknowledge the good work of the Farming for Nature team, which National Parks and Wildlife Service is proud to be funding along with our colleagues in the Department of Agriculture. And just to acknowledge that, and that we've signed off, I suppose, on an increased budget again for this year in 2023, which is all positive and goes to show the commitment that we have to the fantastic work that you're doing, Bridget and the team. But I'm not sure if that will buy me any additional time, so I better just crack on with the presentation at hand. Okay, so hopefully you're able to see that now. You might let me know, Bridget, if that's okay. All good?
Yeah, it's all good, Barry.
Okay, yeah, so great. So I asked for the opportunity to give this presentation via Farming for Nature, given the large volume of interest that is beginning to emerge in relation to precision livestock fencing. And I understand that this is borne out by a very large registration for the webinar here. And a few years ago, perhaps 4 years ago now, we recognised this as a technology that was going to become more available in practice, and so set about developing a project ahead of the curve as a national pilot to understand more about its uses and applications and what potential pitfalls there may be also. So time here this evening is very short, so I would strongly recommend anyone with a serious interest in the subject to download and read our report available on the NPWS website, which I think Bridget is going to share with the attendants here this evening as well. Along with also a recent radio interview that did with the BBC. Both of these will give a little bit more insight into this subject. We'll just give a very high level overview of this evening in the webinar. So firstly, what is virtual fencing? Ultimately, we're talking about controlling the locations of domestic livestock, and that concept, of course, goes way back through thousands of years of farming, through stone walls or earthen embankments or hedgerows or wooden fences or electric fences, etc. But when you pair it all back, this is still effectively the same purpose today with virtual fencing. So let's embrace the modernity of technology where it can be positive, with a determined consideration of environmental issues, including nature, water, soil and climate, and indeed animal welfare, and indeed helping sustain small farms and rural communities and more. Here we have some key parts of the virtual fencing paraphernalia. The devices, whether for cattle, which is the larger one here on the left, or for sheep or goats, are attached around the neck. The cattle collars weighing approximately 1.5 kg and the sheep collars weighing approximately half a kilogram were 0.5% and 0.8% of dexter and adult ewe body weights, respectively. The lady on the right here, of course, is a Galloway, and we also had indigenous breeds, Irish breeds, and continental breeds as part of the project. The colours speak to a smart device with 2G connectivity, typically a smartphone with a dedicated app, which allows for various functions, most importantly being able to determine where you want to keep the animals into or out of, and to have the location of the animals shown on the app at regular intervals, typically every 15 minutes. The concept involves remote mapping, GPS sensors and wireless technologies to keep animals in certain areas and out of others. So designing the virtual boundary is a very simple matter, really. If you look at the image on the left here, you will see where James, in this instance, drew the virtual perimeter, the white line here. And if you look then at the graphic on the top right, you will be able to see that there is multi-directional communication between the app, satellites, and the virtual fence. If the animal and thereby the device breaches the virtual boundary, that will result in a small electronic pulse being administered to the animal. The electrical pulse from the collar is far less powerful than that from a regular wire electric fence. This was actually physically confirmed by some of us involved in pilot holding the collar ourselves and walking beyond the pasture perimeter. So we wouldn't put anything on the animals that we wouldn't put on ourselves. Now, if you think that this is what the virtual fencing is all about, you're very much wrong. The virtual fencing is about training the animals to understand audio cues that are associated with the virtual perimeter so that they turn back before they actually reach the perimeter. The successful implementation and basic foundation of virtual fencing is that animals understand this link and become comfortable with the audio cues, and that they do not proceed further to get an electrical pulse. Here we see the audio zone, typically 3 to 5 meters from the line where they would get an electrical pulse. When the animal turns around after hearing the audio cue, which is a series of beeps, change in pitch coming closer to the line, they will not receive an electrical pulse. So to reiterate, the learning or training process is the key factor, i.e. to associate the link of the audio cue to the electrical pulse, such that once the animals hear the audio cue, they would be deterred from continuing any further, ultimately then without the need for any electrical pulse. And I use the word learning in inverted commas, for I feel that is rather anthropomorphic to ascribe the human concept of learning in this context. Animals are very intelligent and smart. An animal may well understand the fact that if they continue in the direction of escalating beeps, they will receive an electrical pulse, but they may still decide to continue and take the pulse. That doesn't mean that they haven't learned. It may be just that they have weighed up the pros and cons of continuing. For example, a mother would not likely stay behind the line if her calf or lamb needed them. If an animal crosses the line and escapes from the virtual fence pasture, they can walk back into the virtual pasture at any time without receiving a shock. So that's the basic workings of the technology and some fundamental principles for you. The development and uptake of this technology has been slow up to recent times, but there's now significant interest across various stakeholders, including farmers and policymakers, both nationally and internationally, in relation to virtual fencing. And with growing interest out there, we felt it was important to learn more about the application of this technology for various uses in various settings. So the National Parks and Wildlife Service has been the first in Ireland and one of the first in Northwestern Europe to undertake a pilot on virtual fencing so that we can break new ground and to inform the wider rollout or application of this new and emerging technology. But before all of that, extensive research and planning was undertaken before any collar was purchased or put on any animal. Animal welfare is of paramount importance to us and will always be treated with due diligence. As well as extensive background research, we engaged with various stakeholders to inform our approach. A great deal of preparatory and planning work was undertaken. One of the most important elements indeed was setting up a project network in which there was multi-directional flow of information so that we could act as a support network to one another and ensure that experiences were being collated centrally as opposed to individuals going off and doing their own thing without the potential for shared collective experience to inform others. Just to be clear, we were not researching whether the technology works. This is a technology that has been on the European market for some years now and has been approved at various levels. So to the research objectives, one of the primary objectives of the project was to provide a feasibility study to break new ground for other parties who may be interested in adopting this cutting-edge approach to land management. The trials were undertaken with a view to managing important habitats and safeguarding sensitive soils, which in turn are important for carbon, water and biodiversity. While we manage our land, particularly in a country like Ireland, where approximately 2/3 of the terrestrial area is farmland, is of immense importance in addressing the enormous challenges relating to biodiversity and climate crises. In that respect, SWOT analyses, conclusions and suite of recommendations arising from this independent study were to the fore of our minds as outputs from the project. If one were to take a narrow focus, one might think that the National Parks and Wildlife Service interest here would be solely environmental, and ostensibly yes, but a holistic approach was undertaken here, whereby we are also keenly interested in how this works for the animals and how this works for the farmers. And so this is a triangle that needs to be considered in its totality, and we feel that if it is not working for one, it is arguably not working properly. The 15 farmers and herd managers that progressed Ireland's first virtual fencing studies were the real leaders, real stars of the show. The total of 101 cattle collars and 71 sheep collars were deployed for use across various terrain and habitats, with over 7,000 hectares available for grazing, on the project in counties Donegal, Leitrim, Sligo, Galway, Wexford and Tipperary. The dedication, insight and proactive effort of these farmers and their honest review of the technology was what made this study a success. And while I say 15 farmers, as with most Irish farms, it is not just the farmer or a farmer, it's a whole family effort. And in many cases, it was particularly nice to see the intergenerational aspects, where you had grandmothers, sons and granddaughters gathered around the kitchen table discussing this and then working with it together in the field, very much bringing to life this whole image of traditional methods meeting new, giving a glimpse as to what the potential future management of these lands may look like. As alluded to earlier, the coordinated team effort and aspect of the pilot not alone offered a communication and support network and knowledge transfer platform across the farms and farmers, but also allowed for central collation of results and experiences from across a variety of landscapes, habitats, animals and farming systems, so that a solid foundation could be built for future prospective users. And we still keep in touch beyond the publications of our findings and continue to review how it is all working. So the period of study started in 2019 and as mentioned, with a lot of background research and discussions and planning ahead of the first deployment in early 2020. The study ran through to December of last year and, like I say, is still effectively running. But we published our findings from over 3 years of research late last year, so that others who are interested in this could take a look and see what the various strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats are. So to the overall collective findings and an overview of how it worked across the board. And as I mentioned, we looked at it from the perspective of the animal, the environment and how it worked for the farmers. Those three legs of the stool of conservation and grazing. So for the animal, whether sheep or cattle, proper training was found to be absolutely essential. And this goes for the farmer as well as the animal. This is not something that you just get from the courier one day, take out of the box and put on an animal and hey presto. There's a lot of dedicated time needed to understand how the technology works and to give the animal time and space to learn how it works. The better the training, the better the results in the field. As Roy Keane would say, fail to prepare and prepare to fail. So thereafter, very regular and ongoing observations are required when animals are put into the virtual pasture. And remember, each individual is an individual. One needs to understand the individual, understand the herd dynamics, what is going on with any animal at any given time. For example, if an animal is in heat or close to calving or sick, etc., to understand the social structure in the flock or in the herd, recognize the bonds that exist, and so on. And I touched on the word learn earlier and how I've placed it in inverted commas. For some animals well have grasped the concept that an electrical pulse would follow the audio cues, but still not want to yield to that concept, at least in particular circumstances. But for the main part, it should be obvious when animals have come to grips with the whole concept of virtual fencing. And generally, this was good within 48 hours of being first introduced to it. But again, think of the individuals and the various parameters and permutations that may present themselves at any given time and in any given location. Speaking of locations, we found the technology to be of benefit in keeping animals away from dangerous areas, for example, bog holes or steep crags or beach fronts and so on. While the fact that we could monitor the actual locations of the animals at any given time remotely, that was another great advantage in terms of safety and welfare. Actually, in one case, we were actually able to save the life of a calf that had become stuck in a bog hole when the app showed that his mother had been away from the main herd by his side. One thing actually just to mention there as well about the animals is that, and I'll mention it again later, I presume, is that nothing will replace actually physically inspecting and seeing how the animals are getting on in the flesh, not to be just looking at things from a technology point of view, obviously. So from the environment perspective, one obvious advantage, I suppose, in particular settings is the avoidance of physical fencing. For example, physical fencing can provide a barrier to movements for certain animals. It could be a collision risk for birds, for example. Annually, hundreds are found injured or dead, with a lot more suspected to be killed or injured by collision with fences. We were able to prevent poaching of sensitive soils, including peat soils and wet grasslands, by smartly using the technology. We used virtual fencing to appropriately manage and improve various habitats, including coastal grasslands and wet grasslands and peatlands and so on, all grazed in a measured way, allowing for control in grazing levels and timing. Virtual fencing can keep livestock back from rivers that need protection, and it can help protect rare ground nesting birds from disturbance or egg trampling. The concept of grazing in nature, as we know, can often spark debate in relation to what is most appropriate, and sometimes we see polar views emerging. Some would say that grazing should be prohibited and that nature should take its course. Others would say that maintenance of a particular habitat or species in favourable conservation status requires a particular grazing regime. Others might simply consider agricultural output as the sole function of livestock grazing or farming. From a biodiversity perspective, maintenance or restoration of favourable status.
Sorry, Barry, I think you're on the wrong slide. So on our screens. Are you?
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, just sorry.
Thanks very much. From biodiversity perspective, like I was saying, our key interest would be the maintenance and restoration of favourable status for habitats or species of conservation concern, or promotion of species richness, and that should be, in most circumstances, managing for biodiversity should be the guiding objective, and context is key. For example, while bracken often gets a negative rep from some, it can be a very valuable habitat in particular contexts and circumstances. And in this project, the ecological objective was to have as much biodiversity and as many habitats in a good conservation status as possible. And using the app and technology, certain areas were targeted for grazing, while others were kept free of grazing. Timings and stocking rates were also of obvious importance. Overall, improvements were noted in terms of habitat condition and biodiversity value. And when ecologists and farmers work together in positive ways, like on this project, good things can happen. And how did it work for the farmers or the herd managers? Technology, I suppose, should ultimately exist to make life easier. Overall, folks managing the animals found that the technology helped, particularly in relation to time and peace of mind, knowing where the animals are at any time, day or night. Each of the farmers provided a rating out of 5 for various aspects of the technology, and overall satisfaction was relatively high. However, there were some caveats noted, including risks if proper planning was not undertaken, and failures. Like any technology, this can be prone to failures. And while we may refer to using the app and peace of mind and herding, etc., it's imperative to understand that all management of livestock needs to involve close on-the-ground inspection or monitoring and farmer knowledge. There's no getting away from that, nor do I think any farmer worked or saw it would want to. One could argue that by virtue of having the collars on, even more attention needs to be paid to the animals up close to see how they were working with it. So it's important to note that this was an independent and objective study to provide insight and a platform for building on going forward. And we are not salespeople for the collars. We encountered issues and have referenced these in our report. And the issues included complete failure of devices at certain stages, issues in relation to reporting location, registering of collars to new pasture, locational drift, audio failure, failure to emit pulses, inadequate training of animals could obviously prove to be a major issue, and also individual herd or flock behaviour that can override your best plans at times, but you need to be ahead of that. And the project report details various aspects of what we found as strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats from the perspective of how it worked for the animal, the environment and the farmer Due to time constraints, I will not go through each of these in any detail, but they are effectively the core findings of the project. So please do refer to them in the project report. Suffice to say, I suppose, in summary, that this is a technology that brings great positive potential, but one that needs meticulous planning and preparation and oversight at all times. In terms of recommendations arising from the project, there are many. For anyone looking at taking up the technology, firstly, consider whether this is for you or for your organisation. Anyone planning on using this technology should set out clear, justifiable goals and plan precisely how the project will proceed. It sounds obvious, but coming from a farming perspective myself, I'm often surprised at how many farmers do not have a good understanding of the individual animals on their farm. And this is essential before putting any collar on any individual animal. You also need to understand the land and what it needs by way of grazing for a specific purpose. In our case, obviously that was wider ecosystem goods and services outside of food, including nature, soil, climate and water. And of course, one needs to clearly understand the technology and how it is used correctly. And towards that end, we foresee that the development of national standards and protocols in relation to the use of the technology and an accredited training course would be very important. We recommend that any user has an identified and approved mentor who is able to offer effective advice in an efficient manner. The matter of data is massive, as we know. There is significant potential on a mass scale to gather and utilise data to better inform not alone how individual fields or farms are managed, but how entire landscapes are managed, a fundamental requirement in restoring nature, for example. And there's great scope for farming discussion groups, knowledge exchange groups and cooperation projects and EIPs, etc., to take the use of this technology forward, provided it is in an informed, considered and controlled way. In conclusion, the potential for a new era in the relationship between Irish farmers and livestock has been explored, along with opportunities for precise management of lands for environmental interests. These initial steps have been vital to inform the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats of precision livestock management using a virtual fencing in an Irish farming context. The technology has the potential to be a game changer, but should only be considered for any given use or site following very careful and detailed planning and a full understanding of the weaknesses and limitations that may pertain to the technology for any given use or site. Training and mentorship and the provision of national standards in the use of this technology are also deemed important. This pilot has provided real-life scenario testing in an Irish context that can be used to inform an approach for future possible rollout where appropriate and also where it may not be appropriate. Apart from environmental management, identified benefits of precision livestock management included improved lifestyle of livestock managers due to reduced requirement for manual labour and capital costs, for example, time and effort and expenditure in erecting permanent fences, physical fences, and moving temporary fences, and knowing where the animals are at any time via the mobile app. These are key advantages, especially in upland habitats and difficult terrain and offshore islands, and are considered to add to the security and safety of the animals. There is, however, as I say, no substitute for the direct inspection of animals at least once daily, and there are also a number of caveats and conditions that need to be considered for any livestock manager contemplating whether virtual fencing is a suitable venture for them, their animals, and the land that they're managing. It may not be suitable in all contexts and should not be undertaken without adequate training, know-how and backup support. And just to round off there, this was a real team effort, and just to mention some of the people that were involved in a very big way throughout the duration of the project. Okay, thanks very much.
Super, thanks Barry for that whistle stop tour. But really interesting. I'm sure there's loads of questions there. In fact, there's a few that have come up in the chat box, and you can type into some of them as well while we're going along, and we'll also facilitate asking them. So we're just going to hear from two farmers now who have actually carried out the virtual fencing on their land. So we'll start with Eileen at Condon there in Tipperary. Eileen, you have 50 acres plus another 2,000, I think, in commonage. You might just start by telling us about your farming system and then how you started incorporating this into your farming system.
Yeah, so we're based in South Tipperary, the Knockmill Downs, and as mentioned, we have enclosed land, and then we have access to about 2,000 acres of commonage. So we have really our basic system is we have a commonage beef farm, and we keep our animals. We have herd of Galloways, and they have been grazing the hills. They like being outside. They like that kind of environment, and then we sell our beef direct to the consumer.
Great. And how did you get involved in this project, or why did you get involved?
Yeah, sure. Well, we noticed that their NPWS were seeking proposals, and we looked at, we had been looking at the concept of virtual fencing because of the fact that we do keep our cattle out on the commonage, and we also know that there's areas where well, first off, you don't physically fence commonage, that's a non-runner. But there was, areas where we noticed that there was, upland heath that was not being grazed. And we thought, well, this could be a good partnership between biodiversity and also for our animals having access to grazing that land. So that it would be maybe an introduction of more diverse species in those areas that were undergrazed. And we just said, we can only envision maybe the way to do that would be to try virtual fencing. So we submitted a proposal to NPWS for that purpose.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's on a commonage, because I think that probably kind of answers, or asks a lot of questions about kind of, does this answer some things around that, some issues that people have a commonage. But just moving on to your particular farm, you have Galloways, you mentioned.
Yes.
Did you virtually fence all of them? Is this particular breed good for virtual fencing? Or?
We didn't get the breed for virtual fencing. We got it for the type of land that we have. So we always thought, like, we have a very low input farm, we don't have a lot of machinery, we don't have a lot of much really, and we rather than try and manipulate the land to suit a breed, like a continental breed, we chose a breed that suits the land. And so we've had Galloways with a while prior to any thought of virtual fencing. But what we did notice was, it's like anything, you think of a child, like if they can eat the jelly and ice cream first before the broccoli, that's what they're going to do. And there's parts of, there's parts of the land that it would be difficult to keep the animals in, they'd be staying near to other places. And hence those places were being undergrazed. We had been reading a lot about, I suppose, the importance of grazing as a tool for biodiversity. And the virtual fence was a way for us to trial that in partnership with NPWS and their expertise with the ecologist and all of that. We kind of, I suppose for us, it was we had a good delineation between, we left the mapping of those areas and the assessing of those areas to the expert ecologist. And we were happy to utilize the cattle as foot soldiers to do the work, so we were happy to keep that boundary between us. It worked well.
Yeah, and my limited knowledge of Galloways, they're quite chilled as a breed. Were they easy to train in this kind of system that Barry's just told us?
I mean, they are, in terms of their characteristics, they have a double coat of hair. They do like being outside. They're popular in Scotland in the more mountainous regions. They're barrel shaped. Their legs are shorter, so they're lower to the ground. They can navigate the terrain. They like being outside. We chose the animals carefully. I mean, younger animals might be a bit more skittish. That doesn't mean it wouldn't work, but we wanted to have a success with this, so we chose more mature animals, a combination of heifers, cows, and bullock. We chose 5 animals for the research pilot. Okay. And we were happy in the end with the choice that we made.
Great. And you mentioned that it kind of allowed you to approach kind of areas of heath on the commonage that you might not have before. So do you feel in terms of biodiversity, you did see kind of some advantages potentially if you were able to use it in a longer term?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. A game changer, as Barry has mentioned. I would say that that's not an overstatement. Again, the data was useful. Like, we were really, I suppose, motivated by the fact that there was a before and after picture. There was a before and after capture of the effect of the grazing, and just to go up and check the stock, which again, they were in a remote area, but it was just amazing. We used to get excited to go up there and see that they were staying there. It was just like magic, and they were happy there. They were very happy there. We had one of them gave birth in one of the virtual paddocks and reared her calf there. And we always check the condition of the animals, as Barry mentioned, the animal welfare aspect. We use the ICBF, kind of profile to check the condition of the animals. And we would be excited to go up there and see them, and see them doing that work, like where no animals in living memory would stay grazing. Was quite exciting.
Yeah, and I can imagine if you have outwintering cattle and such large areas that you're dealing with, then it's can be a huge advantage. But what would you say were the pitfalls for you in your particular farm? Did you kind of have any challenges while undertaking this?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess, like, as has been mentioned by Barry, the technology was not just new for the animals; it was new for us. So, so I think it takes a while, like, to be pretty au fait with it. You wouldn't want, like, I suppose you have to have a bit of humility about making mistakes and seeing what they were, and getting used to the technology, getting used to the app. The pitfalls could have been, like, again, maybe bad mobile phone coverage. We were lucky that way, but in a mountainous area, you can have patches where it's not great, and you have to be conscious of that. When it gets a bit cloudier, the reception can be poor, and then you have to always be au fait with the technology, but also not 100% trusted, in the sense that, for example, you'll get reports on your phone app. Every I think 12 minutes or so, you get a report, an update on each animal. And we learned an awful lot. Like, when we had the heat in the summer, it was saying that you'd always get a report if the animal wasn't moving, so that could be a problem. And in our case, the animals weren't just, there was one animal, they weren't that hungry in the heat, so they were fine, but they were just, chilling out in the heat. So, but it's important to check, not just say, not panic, but also not rely 100%. You have to always check. I think, just getting used to creating paddocks and creating the right kinds of paddocks, not panicking during the training period. You will have animals will test it, and they will get a pulse. And that's, it's important to see how that works. It's important to see, how the behavior of the animals, who's the leader of the pack, who's going to bring the other ones on, who's going to be like the ones that leads the others astray, that kind of thing. And we also, I think there's a question in the box there. I would 100% find that for us, not unleashing them on the commonage without having trained them in an enclosed field to the virtual fence. I feel you can observe the animals there. And when they do test the virtual fence, there's a physical boundary there, at least, whereas on a commonage, it'd be ages, maybe rounding them up again, when you first put them out, if they haven't been trained in a field.
Yeah, it's interesting, that concept of having technology, that you have to be careful you don't turn into an anxious farmer, kind of constantly. That it definitely has
an armchair farmer.
Do you, I mean, most of all, finally, do you find it manageable and enjoyable? I don't know if that's the right word to say.
Absolutely. It's so exciting. It's so exciting. It's quite dynamic, and it just, it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities in terms of just you know, you could have a conservation grade beef or lamb product. Do you know what I mean? It just adds to, like, we do have, you know, we do sell, you know, meat. So it's just another aspect to our product that we're proud of, and makes it just kind of interesting.
Great, thanks. I'll just move on to James here. And if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat box. And then anyone who's not speaking at the moment, if you have a chance to scribble the answers that you have, but we'll also kind of ask the questions as well. But there might be kind of answers that people can respond to in the crowd. James, thanks for joining us. You have about 130 acres up there near Manal Hamilton in County Leitrim. Much of it is HMV land, high nature value land. You might just start telling us about your farming system and then how you started with virtual fencing on your land. How many animals, etc., do you have?
Sure. Hi, Bridget, and hi, hello everyone. Good to see everyone here this evening. So I'm a part-time farmer, part-time teacher. I don't know which I'm part-time, but anyways, and a dad as well, so throw that in there. But so we farm on our farm suckler cows, sheep, mid-season lamb, and sheep flock. I've recently started a little pasture, well, not little, but a pasture poultry enterprise. And I guess I've been farming maybe 15 years of my own right. And for the first maybe 5 to 10 years, you kind of followed the pattern of what conventional farming was in the area. But, you know, you realize soon enough that it's great if you have a part-time job or another job, but it's not really going forward, farming, it's very hard to see how it'll work in the area, you know. So, I guess all us farmers are from place, really. So I'd be looking around and saying what's on my farm that's special to the farm that you can make use of. And kind of oftentimes we look forward, but you just need to look back some of the time. And I don't know if people are familiar with the concept of bullion, but it's an old process of kind of where farmers used to put their cattle to the hills for the summer months, and then they'd make their winter fodder and maybe have some extra feed then when they bring them back down. And we have commonage behind my house where we live. It's been there a long, long time. And it has never been grazed with cattle in my time. And traditionally, you would assume that it was at some stage. So I was kind of thinking, I'd love to get cattle back up there, you know. But I guess there'd be a lot of trepidation with it because you have to kind of think, you know, first of all, you know, you're a farmer, so you got to be thinking about animal welfare. You got to be thinking about land welfare. You can't be destroying the place if you put animals up into, you know, there's sensitive ecosystems up there. But they've kind of, you know, because of undergrazing, they've sort of been neglected in certain ways. So that's kind of where the whole idea of, look, get them up there and we get virtual fencing. That kind of, the two came together. I remember reading an article somewhere online, and I kind of was like, yeah, that's something that could definitely work up there. It's peace of mind, if you know what I mean. So that aspect of the virtual fencing, that's what I'm thinking. That was why I was using a resource on the farm, not to be, you know, taking too much out of it, like giving a bit and give taken back, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to help everyone win, so to speak, the land, the animals, and the planet.
And tell me, so how many of your stock have it, and how did they respond initially? How was the training period for you?
Yeah, so I have, so as I said, we're a suckler farmer, so, you know, and like a lot of suckler farms in the area, kind of most of the breeding would have bred into continental breeds, and they were never going to be suitable for going up. So I sourced and I built up a small Dexter herd, which are a native Irish breed for anyone who may not be familiar. They're about half the size of a normal cow, or whatever a normal cow is, you know, your conventional cow, so to speak. They're about 300, 350 kilos. So I kind of got into them for a couple of reasons, but with a view to this, to having them going up there, because I knew they'd survive up there. They would graze pretty much, you know, I won't say anything, but they're, you know, they're non-selective grazers as opposed to some of the other animals. So I have currently a herd of 5 of them at the moment, and then with their weanlings and then their calves every year. So the first year, so it would be 15 altogether, but I would never put up, so with a bunch of 5 you would have put up first 2 years. So year 1, I would have put up, I delayed the calving. So normally you calve around June, but we wanted to get them up there on the mountain in the month of June, leading into July. So we delayed calving then till the autumn time. So you weren't going to have issues with that. And we put up the cows, and the cows actually worked very well in the first year. Condition wise, it didn't, you know, it seemed pretty in good shape. And I suppose when they'll calve down in the following autumn, well, the signs were on them that everything was going well. Next year, then I would have put up, you know, as usual, probably tried to run before I could walk. I put up some bullocks. Now, anyone that's familiar with Dexter cattle, they're like the horned sheep of cattle, if you know, they're kind of wild, you know, for the most part. And I guess with the numbers I had, you know, it was hard to be overly selective on temperament and whatnot. But I put them up there in good faith, but they really were, they were a bit harder to handle now up there, you know. That's not to say that they stayed up there, you had peace of mind, but they were breaking through barriers certain times, and but this is the learning of it. But yeah, so that was.
I think they're like that with electric fencing as well. I don't think I don't think the virtual fencing is
well,
the
look,
problem.
I mean, they're headstrong, shall we say?
Yeah.
But again, it's about matching the breed with the if they were fine, you just had to extend your boundary. So if they broke through, you just extended your boundary.
And so did I mean, it sounds like you didn't actually graze the James, do you know what I'm going to do? If you can turn off your video, because I think our I think your bandwidth isn't working. So if you just turn off your video, but I'll carry on talking to you. If that's
okay. It just dropped there for some reason.
Yeah,
that's super. Yeah, no problem. 100%. Yeah,
sorry about that.
Absolutely.
Just really quickly, I know you were saying that you didn't actually put cattle up on the commonage beforehand, but in general, do you think it was easier with the virtual fencing to target your grazing and where you were, you know, where you wanted to graze, and for biodiversity, did you see any results?
Absolutely. Like Eileen mentioned there, we had studies done by ecologists prior to them going up, and there's been 2 studies since. So in the back end of the year, every year they've come back and they've assessed what's going on. So I think there has been an improvement. Well, in fact, I know there has been an improvement, but I probably wouldn't be in a place to talk about it. The ecologists probably will be better about the specifics on it. But yeah, there's been a much improved. I think grazing back some of the, you know, trampling on the heather, some of the purple moor grass, cutting back some of that and giving other grasses and species a chance to get up there. I don't know. I think it has been mentioned a lot tonight, but the training element is very important before you put them to the commonage. It's and the temperament of the animal is very important as well. This isn't we're not salespeople for this company, even though there's loads of positives to it. I tread carefully too.
Yeah, fair enough. And would you say in your own, did you have many personal pitfalls? I mean, I don't know, changing batteries, or was there?
No, because of they're solar powered. So because they go up, you know, in the summertime, you charge them before they go up, and there's actually a reading on the phone that lets you know what state the battery is at. But there's solar panels either side of the collar, so it doesn't you know, it keeps itself. I won't say it doesn't keep a full charge, but it'd be nearly 70-80% when they come off. You know, it wouldn't be a case. Though I can imagine if you're grazing them another time in the year, like it all depends on the habitat type and if it's suitable for winter grazing. Of course, my land wouldn't be suitable now, but there could be issues with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, the solar. Where would you start advising a farmer who's considering this? Where would you kind of give advice on where they start? Where do they go for support, and what are the things to consider if they want to do it on their land?
Well, I guess they have to, like, I suppose it's a broad enough question. A farmer has to ask, why does he want to do it in the first place? And what's he willing to sacrifice, or what's his main objective, her main objective? But like, you know, you have to be thinking about the animal welfare first of all. So making sure the animal is well trained before they go up. Like I said, it's about managing the landscape as well up there. So, you know, if you wanted to go away and buy 10 of these and say, look, I'll throw them on my cattle, I'll put them up for the summer and see how they get on, I wouldn't be advising to do that. That's me. That's not me making the decision. But where do you go to get the advice? Well, I mean, I definitely read the article that Barry put up there online, that the National Parks and Wildlife, that Barry himself produced, but we kind of all fed into that, you know, for what we learned from it. I mean, occasions like this here to this evening as well, talking to farmers who've had experience of it. There's currently one being ran up in the Moor Mountains as well. I was on a call with a group of farmers and advisors from AFB up in the north, so they have a lot of information. You know, I guess, and trying to fit it to your own context and why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm not the salesperson for them. I guess it's not. You know.
And tell me, just because, I mean, because it's farming for nature and stuff, is there one thing that stands out for you, one memory that stands out for you that you were like, oh, I can see that this is going to have actually strong advantages for nature, like on your own personal experience on your hills?
There'll be loads. Like, I mean, it's not just one. I mean, you'd be thinking to yourself, like, if you extend your grazing season, you're automatically cutting down the amount of slurry for the animals being kept in the shed, over the winter. So it shortens up a small, even if it's a week either side, it's still 2 weeks less. So that's going to have an obvious knock-on effect with biodiversity. I mean, you can't just stop the way you've been farming. It's all about trying to integrate what you're doing. I just like being up there watching them, because the sound of them crunching the nice purple moor grass in the summer, and you'd be lying on a limestone rock listening to, if you want to get a moment that you remember, like that's what I remember on a sunny day in when nature is up there, because it's such a diverse habitat up there. It's like there's so much going on, and if you can just, and it gets you back up there, because as farmers we've gone away from it because of the nature of the farming systems that we follow, and we're from the hills or whatever, to a point.
I think what's interesting in your context as well, that you're a part-time farmer, maybe your commonage, it was nearly inaccessible for you because it was kind of, I suppose it took a lot of work to have animals up there, whereas now this makes it a bit more accessible for you to use the commonage, would you say?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, traditionally, anyone who's commonage has to keep a certain amount of livestock, and you have to stock it for a certain amount of time of the year. Generally, that's sheep what it is. And in our particular context, it's not overgrazed due to it's a wet heat commonage, but there's commonage being destroyed all over Ireland because of overgrazing. So it's like just put them up there and that's it. Whereas with this, there's more mindfulness with it, like in the sense there's a reason behind it. You're trying to work with it,
Yeah.
That'd be my opinion of it. No.
But it's manageable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is manageable. Yeah. With the I suppose the caveat that it takes training and it takes a bit of planning while you're doing it.
It's really interesting, and to me, as someone who doesn't know much about this, it sounds as nearly as revolutionary as electric fencing originally was. So we're just going to go to some questions now in the crowd. Now, Callagher, Barry, this might be for you. Any thoughts on it being included in TAMS?
Yeah, so this was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to have a look at this in the first place, I suppose. And we have sent the report to the Department of Agriculture, and they do give grants for physical fencing and that. So something that it's for the Department of Agriculture obviously to make a call on that. But I see Liz Ryder, who's involved in the Acres cooperation projects, as mentioned, that it will be available as one of the landscape actions under the cooperation projects. So I'm sure this will be rolled out a little bit further again, and that obviously is Department of Agriculture funded and then European Commission funded. But the one thing, and I suppose we've said it a few times here this evening, that it would need to be carefully managed and rolled out. Like I would say, it's not something that you just give to somebody and off they go. There needs to be a support network. Like we had, we operated at a small scale with 15 farmers, and we were of great support to one another, where we were able to ask questions and give examples and give experiences and learn from one another and share experiences. So that was really powerful. But if you happen to roll that out to hundreds or even thousands of farmers, there's always potential for somebody not doing it right. It's like any technology or any tool or anything like that. Like, you should have proper training and knowledge of how it's to work properly. And that obviously is of paramount importance when we're talking about animal welfare. And so too, looking at, I suppose, the reputation of how we produce food here in Ireland, with consumers looking for higher standards of animal welfare and ethics and all of that. So the last thing we want is for somebody without proper training and without proper guidance about a support network utilising technology that could go wrong if it's not handled in the right way. If it's handled in the right way, it can be absolutely fantastic and very powerful and a game changer, like I say. So that's a long-winded Kerryman's answer, I suppose.
We're just moving on from that. Just very quickly, can you answer whether there's going to be a follow-on from this pilot project? Are you planning on opening it up to beyond the 15 farmers if people are interested? Is there?
So we have the National Parks and Wildlife Farm Plan Scheme, and we have it with some other farm plans that are coming up as well. And we've got fantastic farm planners on board. Actually, one of them here it's on the meeting here this evening. I've actually recently given colours to I'm pretty sure she's on the call here as well, to a farmer on the east coast who will be managing with goats to address blackthorn on coastal grasslands on an SAC there. So yeah, we will, in a small way, National Parks and Wildlife Service continue to utilise virtual fencing. We've found that it is positive when it's handled in the proper way. In terms of national rollout, I suppose it goes back to my previous answer. I'd imagine the acreage cooperation projects and perhaps some EIPs would take it forward, and possibly even under TAMS as well, who knows.
Yeah, perfect. Eileen, you might answer this one for me from Rosina O'Neill. In relation to animal training, is it done prior to animals being put out in the commonage?
Yes, in our experience, yes. I typed my answer. I don't know where it went, but anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, because you need to observe, and you need to observe and see the creation of the paddock and all of that. You know, you put them out on the hill without understanding the technology yourself or understanding their behavior, and they go out of the paddock, it's hard to round them up, you know, just from a practical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We found having them in a field, and then, you know, we did it in a very phased way. You know, we put an actual electric fence beyond the virtual one. Do you know what I mean? And then we removed the electric fence and maybe just had the posts. And then, you know, we did it over a phased period, so that we could see that, you know, to be fair to the animals, you know, before releasing them on a large tract of land. That's and also the creation of the paddock on a slope. We made sure that it wasn't easy for them to want to escape running down, like animals will naturally want to run down a hill, like, so, you know, the boundary of the paddock would be give them a lot of space not to always breach the paddock. And, you know, so that, you know, you can kind of understand those things when you have them in a kind of a more manageable space before you release them.
Okay, great. James, you might answer this for me. If you have an area within a boundary, do you not want the animals that you don't want the animals to enter, say like a bog hole? Can you create a boundary around these within the main boundary?
That's not something like I had experience of myself.
I see, Eileen, you're nodding there.
Well, I think you can. I don't know. No, maybe I didn't have that either.
Yeah, you can kind of cookie cut areas that you want to keep them out of, if that's a bog hole, for example. Yeah, we actually had that experience, and that's really powerful. And if you think forward as well to maybe other applications, like if you wanted to keep grazing away from a particular area in a field, within a field, like if it was a part of a field that you had ground nesting birds that you wanted to keep back from or whatever, and there's potential application there also, you know. Yeah, it's really versatile. Yeah.
You have to be kind of saying to yourself, like, well, there has to be water access on the site. If you're cutting off the bog hole, you know, there's all these variables, and the size of the bog hole and how far away from it, and if there's, you know, particular type of grasses in the air, you know, it's not you know, simple answer. And going back to what Eileen said about the training field, absolutely. Like, I mean, if people want to visualize it in a rectangular field, let's say maybe a 2-acre field, you would just draw a barrier across, like one line, cutting that, let's say, into 2/3 and 1/3. But that one line is the virtual fence. There's not lines on the animals left and the animals right, or, you know, so they get confused. So they just know when they approach that line in the field, you know, the field is the regular field. But, you know, so you're trying to, you know, it's not that hard to explain, but that's the idea.
Do you change it much? Like, is it like if you want to do more of a mob grazing or holistic plan grazing type situation, how often do you change it, or is that confusing for the animals?
Well, this is it too, and I mean, I holistic plan grazing, I would do that with the layers on the farm, because of electric fencing and all the rest of it. It's much simpler, but and we would do it with cattle with electric fencing. But my experience of doing it on the farm, again, this is only my experience. Hasn't been great, but it's too tight a space for this, because mob grazing, well, it's holistic plant grazing, needs to be condensed in a tight area, and it's just, you know, I for me, I couldn't see it working.
No.
What do you think, Eileen? Would you agree? It's kind of it's better on big areas like commonages, but
and it's, you know, you can have a physical fence in a small area. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't have a physical fence on a commonage. So I suppose, you know, from that perspective, and it you know, the animals they're not feeling trapped. You know, you can have a really big paddock on a commonage.
And I know we haven't gone into costs, but I'm sure it's not a cheap thing to, you don't want to be, it's not something that you can just pick up in the local co-op for cheap. So, you want to be careful that you're doing it. It's going to be worth it. Sorry, James, you were going to say something there?
No, it's just, it goes back to the, 3 things: animal welfare first, then land welfare, and then farmer welfare. Like, if you have to kind of think it that way, it will not work.
Yeah. Fair enough. So have either of you come across, Gerard Walsh has asked, any issues with colours ever getting caught in tree branches or physical fences?
I can take that.
Yeah.
Hi, Jared. No, we didn't have any such issues, but interestingly, one of the lads who was actually managing on an offshore island actually did say to me that he spotted one of his cattle actually scratching off of a fence post, and that thought had come into his mind, as to what if the post got stuck between the collar and the animal's neck, as to what would happen. I don't think that there is any function on the collar to break loose. I could be wrong. Maybe Eileen or James might know more. And at the risk of being presumptuous, I see a lady called Nina Svanborg. So maybe Nina is from No Offense. Maybe might be able to answer that as to whether there's a break loose or break free function built into the collar if it does get snagged on something. I think that's something that we had actually discussed as a group as well, and that we had meant to follow up on, just as a suggestion. No Offense. Hadn't already been thought of.
Yeah, if anyone has the answer to this, feel free to write it into the chat box. Liz Wright has said, virtual fencing is a proposed landscape action available in the Acres Cooperation project zones in consultation with CP teams, just so that people are aware of that. Kevin Duncan's written here, I have a lot of research into using no fence collars and will be starting a project myself in May in the Moor Mountains. I've heard from various people that all animals in the group must have a collar on. Is this what you did with the 15 different projects, or did you try mixed animals with collars on and animals with no collars on? Maybe to the farmers we'll ask first, and then Barry, you can come back to with all the 15. Eileen, did you try with some on, some off? You have.
I think I typed something in there, but yeah, we just used the collars on the 5 animals for our farm plan, and they were by and large away from the main herd. Over time, we did have the experience of the main herd drifting to where the others were. That was after a while, and we were wondering, would the 5, when the main herd drifted off, what the 5 were going to do, but they actually stayed together within the paddock. Now, again, the size of the paddock, I think, is key there. If they're in a tiny little paddock, they're going to want to join the main, whereas we're talking, quite a lot of, a big expanse of land. I think it would be, you'd be tempting fate maybe to have collared and uncollared animals near each other, because obviously they'd want to be together, and you could fight it that it wouldn't work. But our experience was they were separate initially, and yet when they did see each other, where they were in each other's line of sight, the 5 did stay together, but they had been together for quite a while at that stage.
Fair enough. James, were all yours collared?
Yes. I mean, the sample size of 5 is very small.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's different. Be great, Yeah, they were all collared. But you could, in theory, use it for animal monitoring, in the sense if you have a herd of, let's say, 50 cows and they're on a vast area. I mean, you could have it on chain, but you wouldn't be using it from a fence point of view. Then you'd be just using it on a monitor point of view.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have animals in heat, you have all the variables. Just animals herd instinct anyways.
Yeah. And Barry, throughout the 15, or?
Yeah, that's a really good point by James there actually as well, and something that people may have picked up on one of the slides that I had was the location of the GPS aspect of it, that it generates heat maps, so you can see where animals are concentrating. So that's really powerful in terms of planning, and in real time actually as well, moving animals to target particular areas that they may not have been targeting if you wanted to be targeted, or keeping them out of certain areas, etc. In terms, that's a really good question as well, in terms of something that we had considered ourselves at the start as well. So it's a really good question, Kevin. We did ask the suppliers as to what proportion of a herd or a flock would you need to collar to ensure that there is some stability, that it does work properly, that you don't have animals going off in different directions. And the answer that they gave was as much as possible. Because there's no magic formula. It's not like you have to have 50% or you have to have 60% or 70 or 80%. It really goes back to that point that we were making earlier, I suppose, in relation to herd dynamics and individuality and social structure and understanding the animals. And in Eileen's case there, for example, those animals were kept separate for an extended period of time, so they saw themselves as a distinct group. They weren't part of a larger herd. Brendan gave a very good answer there as well in relation to his experience using sheep, that there were other sheep on the mountains, and they did have a tendency to break out of the virtual pasture and try to run with the larger flock, so there was obviously a tendency there to break through the boundary. So yeah, it's a key consideration, and it's going to have to be decided on a case by case, your own individual farm, and knowing your own animals and knowing the land and knowing what you can do and how you can separate out animals. And again, it comes down to costs as well for everybody. I suppose, you can't, if you had 50 or 60 animals, then that's going to be a major cost, to put collars on all of them. So it's going to have to take careful planning, and again, it's for some people, it's not for others. It's not that, I've seen it before. What I love to see in farming circles is individual farmers looking at what's proper and what's appropriate and what's relevant and what's right for their land and for their system, not just going with, well, your man or your one down the road there has got this, so I'll get this, and they've gone zero grazing, so I'll go zero grazing, and mightn't suit at all. And using that innate knowledge and that intergenerational knowledge as well as to what's right for the land and what was done there over generations, that's really crucial and important. So yeah, it's for some people and not for others, I think. Yeah, and everybody's going to have to think as to whether this is appropriate for their site or not. Yeah.
Is there an online support, I don't know, kind of forum or anything where people can, if they have an interest, or is it just a case of kind of contacting the companies that are trying to sell them?
Yeah, I would say that we worked with No Fence, and they were really good in terms of support to contact them, and their website is excellent as well, and I would encourage anybody to look at their website beforehand as well. And there's really good videos and manuals and everything like that, very clear. So that was great. That's about the best online support that I could point people to in terms of No Fence. But again, going back to that point as to support network, we were of great support to each other, and particularly I must say Eileen and James were real leaders there, because they were two of the first to have the collars on, and just the practical stuff of, well, okay, well, you got this, take it out of the box, and now what, just from the very basic steps of putting it on the animals, they were fantastic in talking to the other farmers and actually visiting them as well, and giving all that information. So if there was support networks, that was the point I was making earlier, I think that would be really important and really useful for farmers that are taking this on. And I do think that the likes of the EIPs and cooperation projects, and I see Fate had a comment there as well, they used it in the Suez project as well. I think that's great. It's like everything, it's not just constrained to virtual fencing, but anything where you've something new or a novel approach, or where we have shared knowledge and experiences, and where there's a support network, that can only be a positive thing. So there needs to be more of that.
Yeah, actually, as you mentioned, Faith Wilson's written here from the Suez EIP project in Wicklow, that we had great success grazing that was dominated by purple moorgrass on open mountain, with cattle using the collars, diversified the habitat and restored moss layer beneath the Molinia, where we had previously had pair eroding peat. And John Doherty from the Inishowen Uplands EIP, we have used the collars over winter to help improve area for the curlew. Dexter cows were weaned a week before training, then set to prescribed area where they've broken up the heavy heather and purple moor grass covers. Animals improved condition, and this will leave improved grazing conditions for cattle and sheep, which have stopped entering the area due to heavy covers, all whilst improving habitats for breeding waders. So it's really interesting to see how it's working for different EIP projects, mostly HMV land, I would say, and mostly kind of big open commonage areas. I have been asked here whether the report is available on the MPWS website, Barry.
Yeah, so there is a link. You
The link was right at the top.
Right at the top, yeah, exactly, yeah. And
Yeah.
if I could just, and that's fantastic with the showing Upland's EIP as well, another excellent EIP. Sorry, John, I hadn't seen that comment actually, and great work done there as well. And you mentioned there, Bridget, about we're typically, and what we looked at was high nature value landscapes. And there is big interest in this as well, I suppose, from the more intensive agricultural side of things and dairy farming in particular. That's a whole different ballgame, very, very different animal, and something that requires its own research, something that we wouldn't be part of or have been part of, but there's definitely going to have to be further investigations and research done in that as well, and various support networks if that's going to be taken forward, separate to what we were doing. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So for anyone that's on this, I'll be emailing out the link to this to you, and I can also send you the link to the MPWS report, and also Barry will send me there was an interview with BBC and he'll send me the link to that, and I'll forward that on to everyone. James, just a last word from you. Is there any last kind of thoughts about virtual fencing in your experience and what it has meant to you to have it on your land?
No, a lot's been covered this evening. I guess it's very positive in the whole, as long as it's managed, with the right reasons behind it and carefully, And I think the whole connection together as well, with everyone learning off each other, was a great asset to it. As Barry said earlier on, it's not just the collar itself; it's learning from each other. And it's a good example how to employ lots of different strategies. But yeah, no, I think the future can be bright if it's used right.
Brilliant. Eileen, is there anything you'd like to add coming to the end of the evening now? Is there anything you feel we've missed, or any final words you'd like to say?
Yeah, no, just I think, overall, with the training I mentioned and the time needed for that, I mean, it's like, it's a small thing in comparison. It'd be like, having a beautiful house built and the letterbox is the wrong color. Do you know what I mean? It's in terms of the negatives, it's quite small compared to the positives. And I do find that, it broke the isolation of farming as well. It made it exciting linking with the farmer and with the MPWS. We did listen to the farmer. That was really positive. It was very much interdependent. It wasn't kind of a top-down experience for us. So that was great. To see other people come and see that how we farm and be excited about it was very encouraging.
Excellent. And then Barry, as an ecologist and from an agroecology point of view, any last thoughts or things that you'd like to say?
Just again to acknowledge everybody that was involved in the project. There was a lot of people that contributed to it, but above all the farmers like Eileen and James and many others, that it's just one of the most positive experiences that I've had to date, actually, in working with those farmers, because they were all, each to a person, outward looking, I suppose, not just saying, well, look, what can I get out of this? They're actually looking at it and seeing it from a national perspective, saying, look, we're leading on this here, and we can, I suppose, pave the way for others and show the pros and cons of this technology. And so it was really, really great, and just to see the care and the love that the farmers had for their animals as well, and the knowledge that they had for their land and where they want to bring that land, and their interest in the environment was just overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it just shows the power of a network. And like you say, you have your 15 farms around Ireland all supporting each other, and all these other EIPs and stuff that are using it, it's just by sharing that knowledge of what it's able to change for biodiversity. But what's needed also, it sounds to me like training's big needed, the animal welfare, the type of animal, or how you're using it is very important. So thanks to all of you for sharing your knowledge tonight. And like I say, this is recorded, so it will be up on our YouTube site. So if you know of anyone that's interested in listening to it, please feel free to share it. Thank you so much to Eileen, to James, especially, who are doing this on their land. And I think it's a really interesting kind of future for commonages, because I think that's kind of challenging areas for a lot of people. Barry, thank you very much for coordinating this and also for giving the kind of highlighting the project up front. So Thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you again soon on more Q&A sessions. But meanwhile, enjoy your Tuesday, and thank you to everyone for joining us. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks.